and Dr. Anna Pathe Smith is going to be talking to us about her work outside the OU. So I'm going to give Grace a minute or two just to set up the recording. And we're recording now, that's grand. Thank you. So, as I say, welcome to the next in our series of Bringing Law to Life. And our session today is with Anna, as I explained, who, as well as being a tutor on W212 and W340, has worked as a legal advisor, legal assistant with issues concerning the Court of Protection and private clients, so wills and probate law. So I'm delighted to be talking about that in a few minutes. And one of the things we're going to try and do as we have our chat is to focus on the issues of accessibility into the profession, what you might find within your own experience that you could add to your CV that will help you to get that job interview, and other things that you might like to think about when you're looking at legal careers. And the importance of that is that although the legal profession, the bar and solicitors profession, have recognised the value of diversity and inclusion, those steps to creating that haven't happened as quickly as we would like. There still seems to be this idea of the best will trickle up to the top, whatever happens. So there hasn't been that much work on making a really strong, independent, diverse profession. And I think we're probably going to touch on the question of women in the law. We know that around 53% of solicitors are female, but very few of those are at senior management and partner and senior partner level. And the numbers of people in the profession from different backgrounds, different financial backgrounds, gender diversity and so on is very, very limited. And the same is true at the bar as well. So one of the things we're hoping to do is to increase awareness and understanding of the fact that although there might be obstacles to entering the profession for any of us, there are also ways around that, and there is hope, and there are things that you can do to enhance your employability. So delighted to welcome Anna. And I think my first question is going to be, what is the Court of Protection and what do you do?
That's an excellent question. Thank you so much, Bryony. And it's a real pleasure to be here this evening with all of you. So the Court of Protection is a branch of the High Court. And essentially its function is to look after people or oversee the looking after of people who don't have the capacity to deal with their own affairs. So what can happen in those cases is there might be a power of attorney, but what I was dealing with in the Court of Protection Department at my firm of solicitors is where a deputy has been appointed by the court to look after someone's affairs. And that could be for any number of reasons, but the main groups of cases where someone might not be able to look after their own affairs are where someone has dementia, for instance, a lot of elder care clients, or at the other end of the spectrum where younger people are involved with the court is perhaps where they've been born with a disability, or where they've had a serious accident which has caused them to lose their capacity through some form of brain damage. And there are two streams that the court deals with. There is the financial stream and also the health and welfare stream. And I was working in the health and welfare stream, so making sure that people were properly looked after and managing their money to achieve that.
Okay, so how did you get into that area of work? What was your career progression?
Thank you. Yes, so I'm from a rural background, very rural Herefordshire, grew up on a farm. So law was not perhaps the obvious choice for me to go down, but I've always been interested in, you want to make the world a slightly better place, interested in people, and vulnerable people. So I went through my law degree, and I didn't really enjoy that until I got to do things like family law and human rights and legal theory and what I call the juicy topics, as though we do need all areas of law to be able to understand those juicy topics. That's where I really came into my own. And then I was fortunate enough to be mentored by Nazir Afzal, who was Chief Crown Prosecutor for the Northwest, who was involved in a lot of child sexual exploitation cases. Through working with him, I then went on to do a master's degree in things like advanced family law, gender law in the States, and prison law, amongst other things. And then I came to the point where I was trying to apply for, now needed to get some practical experience. And I was quite open-minded as to what that was, but I did know that I wanted to work with vulnerable people, or do something that recognized that people need help, or try to make some kind of positive impact in the world. And so when I got in with a particular firm and they offered me a position, first of all within construction, which wasn't quite what I wanted, and then they came back with the Court of Protection, and I thought, this sounds wonderful. It sounds fantastic. I can really get my teeth stuck into this. So that, in a nutshell, is how I got to it. But yeah, I think we'll be talking in a bit as well about the applications and how we get there in a bit more detail as well. So
Yes.
that's the
Yeah,
overview.
yes, we'll definitely come on to that, but I'm interested that one thing you haven't mentioned is qualifying as a solicitor. Was that something that was essential for you in order to get the job that you do?
Absolutely not. So it was, I had two law degrees, but I didn't have any professional qualifications. And so I was hired as a legal assistant. And I was, as a legal assistant, I wasn't there just photocopying. I was doing chargeable work. So contacts with the clients, FaceTime with the clients, doing important, actual actual work of that you need to do in a solicitor's office. And it's just it was one of the many available routes. So if you are like me, I had done lots of time at university and I just didn't want to do any more exams. I wanted to crack on and get some experience. And that route was one where if you were stayed in the company for long enough, then they would have helped me through my exams and then on to a training contract and to qualify as a solicitor. But I was absolutely able to do meaningful work without having the SQE or something. It was named something different back then. But yeah, so that's a really, really good question.
That's really interesting because it's very encouraging, I think, to hear that one can have a really fulfilling and meaningful legal career without having to qualify as a solicitor first, and that's an option that's open to you later. That's really good to hear that. So, how might a student go about getting into a firm like you managed to do?
Absolutely. So, I mean, the key thing really is they're looking for your experience and your skills, and that doesn't necessarily mean other legal experience. They're not expecting you to apply for a job, your first perhaps professional legal role with 10 years post-qualification experience, because that's not something that people often have at the start of their careers, fresh out of their degrees. So key things are skills, and as long as you can make it relatable to the job that you're doing and relevant to the firm. So first of all, you're looking and researching your firms and finding out about their culture and their area of expertise. What are the partners doing? Are they in the legal 500 in your area, for instance? And then it's making your skills relatable. So, in an area like the Court of Protection, where you're dealing with people who don't have capacity, the chances are they've got very complex health needs. They will have a number of health professionals for those various needs, navigating local authorities, navigating the care system, all of those issues. If you've got experience as a carer or having dependents with high needs, then you can absolutely make those kinds of skills relatable in your job application for a role. I mean, that wasn't something that was relevant to me, but I know that a lot of students at the OU are studying with the OU because they have very complicated personal lives and they're juggling all these different plates. So I absolutely think that when it comes to, if you wanted to pursue a career in working in the Court of Protection, then I think that would be something that you could capitalize on. I had experience in customer service roles and dealing in some tricky situations. And I was able to draw on those, especially when it came to interview. They want to see how you would deal with people. You're you're essentially dealing with clients, and you want to make sure that if not, they may not necessarily be happy, but they want to know that you're on their side and that you're doing your best for them. So I was able to draw on those kinds of experiences. But essentially, it's really making sure that you put in the research time, and it to be as onerous as it sounds. You can just make yourself a nice cup of tea and have a scroll through their website for half an hour, or see what their corporate social responsibility policy is, and all those kinds of things, and drawing on that, and even using like the kind of vocabulary that they use is in your application is a good way to show that you've actually looked at their website. And finally, another thing that I did was to call ahead before I actually made the application. And what I did was I asked, is there someone who I could chat to? I'm really interested in finding out more about your firm, about the role. I just want to have a chat and see what it's all about. And I guarantee you they will be more than happy to put someone on the phone to you, probably someone who's just started, who knows what it's like to be you. So very relatable and easy to talk to. And that's something, again, which I drew on an interview, because I was able to say, oh yes, when I was talking to Jane, we were talking about this and how it relates to the work that you do, and I found that really interesting. And it just shows that extra level of engagement that makes your application stand out. And in the end, you may have to go through the process a number of times with lots of different firms, and that's totally normal. But just because it's competitive doesn't mean that it's not worth sticking with it. And you will get there. Every time you do an application, it's a stronger application as well. So it is absolutely worth building in that resilience as well.
That's really good advice. So it sounds as if you can make yourself stand out by making a little bit of personal contact, researching the firm and making sure and thinking about how you would be a good fit with them and they with you, and looking at your personal situation to see what things you can pick out to put on your CV that aren't necessarily legal. So any sort of
Absolutely.
personal skill, that sort of thing. That's really brilliant advice. Thank you, Anna. So, thinking about accessibility specifically, and we've thought a bit about this being a good job for somebody with experience of being a carer, but are there any specific equality and diversity considerations, do you think, in being a legal assistant or legal advisor?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I was in the department, it was almost entirely female, and it does is often there are patterns within um, different areas of legal practice that it's not the rule, it's not exclusively so, but it often tends to be the case that you find more women working in some areas and more men working in others. And the exception to this was that pretty much everyone in the department was female, apart from the head, who was a male. And so I think that reflects the seniority gap that we often find when it comes to accessibility and diversity. So we know, I think you mentioned at the start, that actually now today we've got 53% of solicitors are women. But owing to more complicated career patterns due to balancing some of those life challenges that we were talking about earlier, it tends to be the case that women aren't accessing those higher, more senior roles as much as their male counterparts. But I do hope, I try to be an optimist. So I feel like perhaps in, 20 years' time, when today's more newly qualified solicitors are getting to that age, that they are able to maintain access to those senior roles. So I try to be positive about that.
Do you think there are any specific barriers for other forms of difference? So perhaps some form of disability or gender issues or anything like that, that make it harder for people to enter this area of work?
Um, I mean, we also know that there is a race issue. And again, that was reflected in my department, that those who were qualified tended to be white, and those who were in more secretarial roles were more likely to be ethnic minorities. Um, I think in terms of actually going for it, when it comes to The accessibility issue. I think I mean, I come from a rural background where, you have to put in the extra effort. And if you're in a farming community or a coastal community, you're more likely to have to put in the extra effort and resilience anyway, just to get through. And the opportunities, for instance, like work experience might not be as available simply in terms of numbers, like as if you lived in Manchester or Birmingham or London or one of the other, or any city. Um, so I think if you can harness that resilience and just keep going and making sure that you're doing yourself justice, that's all that we can do. There are barriers, we know there are barriers, but that doesn't mean that we should accept them. You just have to keep going to push those down.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. That's always a difficult question to deal with. And I suppose one of the things is that the people who need the help of the Court of Protection, there's no discrimination there, is there? People,
No, absolutely not.
dementia
No.
doesn't discriminate, and other forms of vulnerability don't discriminate. So I guess any sort of experience or understanding of the different communities that the Court of Protection serves would be an asset.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, drawing on those skills of being able to juggle all the different authorities, there's so many different stakeholders that you deal with when you're working there. You're dealing with the family, the friends, the neighbours, the cleaner, the health professionals, the local authority, the government, the bank, the utilities, everybody. If you're that person who's already used to dealing with all of that, then that's a major asset, and to harness all those skills, and empathy as well. You have to actually care about your clients. You're trying to look after their best interests, and they're in the Court of Protection for, it's not going to be for a happy reason, so that they're coming under the jurisdiction of the court. So
Yeah. And
yeah.
do you work quite closely with the families that are,
You
yeah.
can do, yeah, which can be challenging because it might be the case that the authority has been removed from a family member to a professional deputy to look after the affairs. So it might be that there has been perhaps some financial abuse, some manipulation going on there that the court has monitored and found a problem with it. So that is one of the challenges of the role, to have to negotiate some of those more challenging relationships. I had phone calls on late Friday afternoon demanding money for the weekend because the deputy was handling finances for the client, and it just doesn't work like that. So you do learn to manage certain people. It's not uniformly like that, but you do, in Court of Protection and in private clients, come across some ways that families can be, how they can act towards each other. Was it certainly, it was an eye-opener for me
Mm.
to deal with firsthand.
Yeah. So it sounds like you have to be compassionate, but also tough and firm
Absolutely. Yeah, and
and
it can be quite
confident,
a
I guess.
challenge.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about work-life balance. You've just touched on that. Perhaps you could say a bit more.
Of course. So when I started, I was very fortunate. My boss would shout at me if it was 5 past 5 and I was still there, saying, "Go home. You finished your time for the day." But I think, as all firms vary. So it really is a matter of, when you first start, of feeling your way around and making sure that you shouldn't be working 24 hours a day, but equally that you're meeting the relevant expectations. And I think it's something that, as you progress, it's more likely that, in some places longer hours might be expected. So that is something to kind of negotiate as you go along. I think the biggest challenge for me was in terms of managing my time. So 6-minute billable units were a wake-up call after so many years studying, where you can kind of lose yourself in reading one particular thing. So what that means is every 6 minutes you have to account for your time. So, answering emails or made a phone call, or you know, catching up on administration of whatever form. So time management is really a key skill. And again, this is something that lots of people already have from their own personal lives, that you can bring to your applications and your interview skills to show that you are able to look after your time efficiently and, get to the work, sit down, do the job, and meet your efficiency criteria, and you can account for your time in that way.
Yeah. Do you think it's the sort of role that would accommodate a degree of flexible working or part-time working?
Absolutely. I think firms are getting more used to working in this style of way, and because there's benefits for them as well, to have different perspectives and different types of people working. And I think, yes, I would say it's this kind of role where um, you don't you apart from some client contacts, which isn't really negotiable, there may be instances where you can have a little bit more of a flexible working pattern. I had colleagues who did, perhaps a 9-day fortnight, or with those, it wasn't, if you have children, they would say, I can't do any meetings before 9:30 because I've got to do the school run, or I can't do anything after 3:30. They might still be answering emails at home or on the move, but that was up to them and their discretion. So I would say, that it's if you find the right employer, then that is something that you should be able to negotiate, hopefully, as you progress, and as you put in the effort, and you reap the rewards back from that.
Yeah, that really sounds very heartening. I'd like to come back to finish off actually to something that you said near the beginning of our chat, which was when you were talking about your role model, and which sounds wonderful, and gosh, how lucky you were to have such a fantastic model. He's somebody who's been very vocal on television, isn't he, around some of the criminal justice issues. But how
Absolutely.
how on earth did you get him to be your mentor? And how
That's
could
an
how could
excellent question.
students find somebody that might help to mentor them?
Absolutely. Yes, so I was very, very fortunate. So, and you're right, I do see him on the television occasionally and think, oh, there he is. Um, did my law degree at Birmingham University, and when I graduated, he was getting his honorary doctorate, and he just gave this acceptance speech that talked about his work, women's rights, looking after those who suffer from exploitation, the law's role in doing that, and it just set my mind ablaze. I was so excited, and it just kind of hit all those boxes that made me want to do law in the first place. And so what I did was I wrote to him, and included some of my own work in that letter. And he got back to me. We spoke on the phone, and then he invited me to attend a number of different events with him. He introduced me to key stakeholders, some of them including MPs. And he really helped and supported my applications for further study as well. So the way I achieved that was by being active. No one is going to email you out of the blue and say, do you want my mentorship? You have to go out and find them. And I think, when you find that person that really makes you excited and enthusiastic about whatever area of law it is you want to go into, or whatever profession, if you're not thinking of the legal profession, that their professional values match yours. And I think when you have those conversations and you're really having a meeting of minds, that's where that kind of magic happens. And it's good for them to support you as well, because they're showing that they're helping the next generation of emerging professionals in the area. And it helps create some really positive conversations. But I think the key is really to go and put yourself out there. And it's not always easy, especially if you are working from home mainly, or not out and about, perhaps in ways that we may have been pre-pandemic. But we've got so many resources at our fingertips. We've got LinkedIn, we've got all the podcasts, like anything. Don't ever feel like too embarrassed to reach out to someone who may be a professional kind of role model for you, because the chances are they will love getting a letter or an email from you saying, I love your work, please can we have a conversation. I think that's you absolutely put yourself out there.
Yes, people do like sharing their expertise in my experience. And of course, it's worth remembering that they started where you are.
100%.
And if it's like being nice to learner drivers on the road, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
They will probably remember what it was like, and you never know what might arise. So that's absolutely brilliant. Anna, thank you so much. What
My
a
pleasure.
fascinating session. Now, I'm just looking to see if there were any questions in the question pod. I can't see any. Grace, if you put up the career slides, that would give people a chance to write a question in the Q&A pod if anybody does have any questions or thoughts, and I'll go through the slides and then pick up any questions. So for those of you that are joining for the first time in particular, we want to emphasize the links to the wonderful careers resources which the OU has. So there are some specific resources for law on the Law Study Home website, but we've also got the careers and employability services, and you can access them through the help centre, which you will find linked to your OU student homepage. Lots of guides and resources there, activities to help plan a career pathway, but also the Career Service are more than happy to talk to you, to give you a semi-formal interview, to look at what your careers options might be. There's lots of help around interviewing and improving your CV, and the Opportunity Hub is somewhere where you can find opportunities, look at workshops for developing your skills and so forth. So the Build Your Career with Confidence link, that's well worth having a look at. And don't forget, and I think we've touched on this today, OU students and alumni, that's our graduates, make really strong candidates. If you think about the things we've talked about today around being able to multitask, managing time, perhaps dealing with difficult life circumstances, having very good people skills because you've negotiated your way through various organizations, perhaps caring responsibilities, the other work that you've been doing whilst you've been studying. All of those things give you really strong employability skills. And having some advice with putting up your CV will help you to make the most of those. And all these resources are open to you right now, but also for up to 3 years after you finish your study. Resources and tools will be available to you. Next slide, please, Grace. And that's just a thank you. And please, could we ask you to complete the feedback survey? That's really helpful to us in planning for the next set of bringing law to life sessions and seeing how we might develop this project. So your opinions are really helpful to us. If there are no questions, I think I'm just going to say again, thank you so. Oh, there are some posts. Wonderful. Just bear with me a moment. Grace has just put these in. Oh no, Grace has just put a link into the feedback participant form in the Q&A box that's there for everybody. Is it also on the forum, Grace? Believe it is. Just give me a thumbs up. Okay. So that's brilliant. I think we can end the recording there. Thank you very much. And Anna, thank you so much again.